Hey buddy, watch this.
Hello, Regis Kilbin is the name, and Hearthstone is the game, and this is part 3 of my journey to Unguro card review. I've got 6 new cards to take a look at this time around, including a few cards that I think you're going to find very interesting because they're good answers to aggressive metas. In particular, they're great at answering pirate decks, which I know have some of you down right now. So it seems like Journey to Unguro might finally be the expansion that's slowing Hearthstone down a little bit, which is a trend I personally am looking forward to. But without any further delay, let's go ahead and jump into the cards, starting off with the first one, which is a Paladin spell at 8 mana called Dinosize. And I love the artwork on this one. You can see a tiny Murloc growing into a presumably giant Murloc, dinosaur-sized Murloc. And what this spell does is it's a buff that sets a minion's attack and its health to 10. So it's sort of a super blessing of kings, right? So you can take a 1/1 Silverhand Recruit and turn it into a 10/10. And that's cool because buffs essentially have charge, right? You can take a minion that's already got initiative on the board. It can already attack and instantly give it +9 damage. I guess theoretically you could even give it +10 damage if it's a 0 attack minion. So it's like a 10 damage charge for 8 mana, which is actually pretty cool in and of itself. But of course, you're also giving the minion 10 health, so it's going to be very difficult for opponents to kill that without some sort of hard removal option. So I don't know, this spell is interesting. It's certainly got some applications with burst damage, as I said. It's a lot of presence on the board. The real problem here is that an 8 mana spell is relatively slow. Very, very slow, in fact. The great thing about Blessing of Kings, and that's not even a card we see a ton as far as play in constructed format, but the great thing about that is that it's sort of a mid-level cost, so you can get a 5/5 out onto the board earlier and have that charging. This comes so much later that there's already crazy stuff happening by turn 8. You're already playing the Tyrian Fordrings and all the really high-value cards. So these kinds of really powerful effects shine a little less that late into the game. Plus, I don't really understand what kind of deck this is going to fit into. I don't know what it's going to look like. Is it a mid-range paladin? Is it a super control paladin? Does this have implications with Murlocs and things like Finja the Flying Star, where you can buff your Finja really strong and keep him around and keep summoning Murlocs? I don't know what the world of Dinosize looks like, and that's really the problem for me as far as reviewing this card is concerned. It clearly has potential. It clearly has a powerful effect. It does something really strong and cool. So I'm not throwing it out. I'm not saying it's a terrible card. I just don't currently have a vision for how it's utilized or how it makes sense in the meta. So I'm hedging my bets on this one and probably saying it's just an average card that won't see a ton of play. But I'd love to be wrong about it because it seems really cool and certainly has some potential. So moving on to the next card. This is the first of the sort of anti-aggro cards, the anti-pirate cards that were revealed in this set. And this is the 3 mana neutral minion Tar Creeper. It's a 1/5 taunted minion, but it has +2 attack during your opponent's turn. So as a defensive card, this is essentially a 3 mana Sinjin Shieldmaster. And unbelievably, Sinjin Shieldmaster is still a card that occasionally gets teched into decks as an anti-aggro option, sort of the 4 mana taunt that works really well, just slowing down your opponent. So this is a better version of that, a cheaper version of that. Now the fact that it has 1 attack on your turn is certainly a negative implication, but usually the goal of taunt minions isn't to use them to attack your opponent's board, it's to stabilize and force them to attack into you. So for all intents and purposes, when you care about it, this minion has 3/5, which is really, really good. And when you care a little bit less, it has 1/5. But you could still attack into pirates and South Sea deckhands and patches and all that stuff with a 1/5 minion. So it's not like it's totally useless. It still does something. It's a little bit worse perhaps in a late game scenario where you've stabilized the board and you're trying to kill your opponent before they burn you down with burst. It gets a little bit weaker there, but still not significantly so, and hopefully you have other ways to win the game in those kinds of scenarios. The last point of note is that this is an elemental. Now, we haven't seen any elemental synergy cards yet, but there may be some elemental synergy cards that make this guy even better. You know, give your elementals +1/+1 or something, and this becomes like a 4/6 taunt for 3, which would be even crazier. So there is a chance that this card is actually very, very good. And yet another nice thing about this card is that it doesn't have the conditional mana cost of a card like Second Rate Bruiser. Tark Reaper basically allows you to play a Second Rate Bruiser guaranteed on turn 3, perhaps even turn 2 with a coin. So it can do more things, it's more flexible, but is very, very similar in what it accomplishes. Now clearly it has one less attack than Second Rate Bruiser, but still the same idea and perhaps even more elegant in its execution, which I really, really like. So that said, let's move on to the next one, which is actually a direct pirate counter. This is a tech card specifically designed for pirates. This is the Hungry Crab of the pirate world. It's the 2-mana Golakka Crawler, 2-mana 2/3 beast, and its battle cry, destroy a pirate and gain +1/+1, so it's exactly like Hungry Crab, but a little extra mana, a little extra stats. And basically, if this works, you get a 2-mana 3/4 that's also a beast, which is really, really nice. That's the Totem Golem without the overload, plus you're destroying a minion. So if pirates stick around, this card obviously has some crazy potential. That said, I don't know that it'll be worth it outside of a deck that also has beast synergy options, because a 2-mana 2/3 when you're not playing a pirate deck is a totally dead card in your hand. Like, it just doesn't do anything. So that's pretty risky to include. But if you have a deck that relies on beast synergies, if you're able to throw down that Houndmaster and turn this into a good minion anyway, just because you need beast bodies on the board, if it's a kill command activator, if it does some cool stuff with druid beast synergies, it really could make sense to run Golakka Crawler instead of just, a generic beast that maybe is a 2-mana 3/2. So instead of, River Crocolisk, Golakka Crawler is an option that gives you that occasional big win against pirate decks. And as far as we know, pirate decks look like they're going to be fine in Journey to Ungoro. They're not losing a lot of stuff from standard rotation. Pirate Warrior should still be around, theoretically, but this kind of card could help keep that in check. Particularly, like I said, if beast decks start to rise in popularity on the ladder. So this could serve as just what is needed to counter pirates. Now, I don't hate pirates as much as some people, so I don't know that it was totally necessary. Some of these other tools like Tark Reaper might have been enough on their own, but I like that Blizzard's at least thinking about it, tossing people a bone. If you absolutely hate pirates and you want to beat them at all costs, here you go, you've got Golakka Crawler to do exactly that. So this card is interesting. It's certainly got some potential to be played. Up next is a mage minion called the Arcanologist, a 2-mana 2/3 with a battle cry, draw a secret from your deck. That's draw a secret. That is not summon a secret or play a secret. It's not Mad Scientist. This is just a novice engineer with a lot of extra stats that guarantees you draw a secret. And that's actually a really strong effect. Don't underrate that, because drawing a card that you have a pretty good control over what it is gives you a lot more influence and control over the game. So when you play this, if you know you're only running ice blocks, you can guarantee that you'll find your ice block. And you might need that for that last second save. If you're running Mirror Entities, you know you're going to find Mirror Entity and can play it before your opponent plays Mountain Giant on turn 4. Like, there's a lot of ways for you to influence how the game unfolds with a card like this, conjoined with the fact that you're building your deck. So that just gives you an extra layer of control over the game, which, good players and good deck builders in particular can take advantage of. I also like the implications of this card with things like Kirin Mage and Cabal Lackey, 2 cards which are really high tempo plays that can help you get a lot of mana onto the board very quickly by playing secrets for free, but in the past have just been too unreliable because there's not that many good secrets that are board oriented that you want to play, and secondly, you're not guaranteed to draw them by any means. So if you can add another card or two that are guaranteed to get secrets into your hand, and in fact, if there are a couple better mage secrets added with Journey to Ungoro, at least maybe one other board-centric secret added that helps you get ahead in the early game, then I think you could see a package with Kirin Mage, Cabal Lackey, Arcanologist, and maybe like 2 or 3 good secrets, maybe just one really, really good secret that goes a long way towards giving the mage an early board presence. And As far as like an early game mage is concerned right now, tempo mage has always been the thing lately, but Flamewaker's going away, so they need some sort of replacement and some sort of early curve that works. So perhaps Arcanologist is that venue, that path to early game success. I don't know if that's the case. Maybe it doesn't work. Maybe secrets aren't there. Blizzard might just be trying to force this as an archetype on us, secret mage, but it could just not stick because the secrets aren't strong enough. So if we see a good secret, I have hopes for Arcanologist. If not, I just don't know that she's going to be able to do enough. But certainly the card has potential. I like the design of it. It's not terribly bad by any means, so I hope that we do see some play out of this card before the end of this expansion. So let's move on to the next minion. This one is the Priest minion, Tortollan Shellraiser. He raises shells because he's got a shell for a shield, so he raises it. Get it? It's super funny. It's a 4-mana, 2/6 taunt minion, yet another minion that's probably good at countering aggressive metas. And he has a nice little death rattle. Give a random friendly minion +1/+1. Now that's an effect that Priest has had before with stuff like Dark Cultist, where you give another minion some stats. But the problem there was, of course, that your opponent could always just kind of kill the death rattle guy last after they killed everything else, so you never benefited from the buff. That's a lot harder to do with a taunt minion. They can still get around it with spells and so on and so forth, but this does force their hand a little more, making it slightly more likely that that death rattle is actually beneficial, so that could pay dividends more consistently, meaning this minion on average gives you like 3/7 in stats, which is pretty good for 4 mana. It's also got taunt, so there's a little bit of a bonus there. And the real implication of this card, though, I think, is that it's a death rattle minion that feeds into Priest's new quest with Journey to Ungrow, which if you didn't see, if you summon enough death rattle minions, you get Amara, Warden of Hope, which is this crazy card that's a huge heal and in fact increases your health and has a huge stat allocation for her cost, and super defensive card. So this feeds into that, a really defensively oriented Priest that has a lot of late game survival power that also encourages a N'Zoth build around, because you've already summoned all these death rattle minions, including Tortollan Shellraiser, which would make your N'Zoth turn really powerful. So you get like a super late game N'Zoth, crazy minion that keeps you alive. It all obviously feeds into itself, and Blizzard is clearly designing very specifically to encourage that kind of play for Priest, where they bring stuff back to life and keep themselves alive, in fact. And the cool thing about Tortollan Shellraiser, and I've said this a lot before with cards like Chillmaw, card that I love, and I keep repeating that over and over again. The cool thing about running Chillmaw in N'Zoth decks is that he gave you a taunt, a guaranteed taunt. Because sometimes the problem with N'Zoth is you'd play N'Zoth, you'd summon 5 dudes, but none of them have taunt, so your opponent has like 3 or 4 minions on board, and they just run over you and kill you, and you're dead. When you have taunts that come out of N'Zoth, you can go a lot farther, because it forces your opponent to play through your N'Zoth and play through the minions, and often they already have beneficial death rattles, so it can all feed into itself and really support your N'Zoth, unless they just have some kind of crazy board clear like Twisting Nether or whatever. And this minion's another one that does exactly that. So now they have to kill this minion. It gives your N'Zoth +1/+1. N'Zoth's a little bit harder to kill, gets to hit face harder, so on and so forth. So we'll have to wait and see what other kinds of death rattle minions have been provided in this expansion, but clearly Priest is going to have some cool tools and a nice deck design to build around, a pretty obvious one at that, N'Zoth Priest. If they gave it the right tools, Tortollan Shellraiser is going to fit really nicely. It's going to be a good inclusion, and that deck is going to be really strong in control-style matchups. If that all falls apart, I think Tortollan Shellraiser is still a fine card. We've seen like Bloodhoof Brave, I think is the name of the card, the Warrior 4-mana 2/6 taunt. It clearly had some attack upside that it enraged and it became a little bit more threatening, but that was a playable minion. I think this in the very same way will be a playable minion. It's got some upside with the Death Rattle. So it seems like a solid card that certainly will be experimented with, and in fact probably played quite a bit. So that said, let's move on to the final card here. This is actually one that was revealed quite a while ago, but I missed it in my first review, so I wanted to circle back and make sure I covered this one. It is the Gentle Megasaur, 4-mana 5/4 neutral beast that has the battlecry Adapt your Murlocs. So clearly another Murloc synergy card, maybe even like a Menagerie synergy card, since it includes both beasts and Murlocs, the double tribal. So there's some possibilities that exist there. But really being able to adapt to multiple minions is pretty cool. So if you're able to get a nice little board of Murlocs out, just 2, 3, maybe even 4 Murlocs, they're already probably going to be buffing each other and synergizing with one another. Then you plop down your Gentle Megasaur. It's actually a nicely statted minion on its own, so a pretty threatening position on the board just by itself. But then also it's giving your Murlocs Wind Fury, it's giving them Divine Shield, it's giving them +3 attack. That's really scary. 3 Murlocs that are already buffed with +3 attack is going to just hammer people in the face. So maybe the era of Murloc comes back. Now, we've already seen Murlocs come back a little bit with sort of the water package, which is Finja the Flying Star and a couple Bluegills and your Murloc War Leaders. And that's a nice little package that's very, very powerful, and this card fits right in there too. If you play Finja on 5, you summon 2 Murlocs, you play your Gentle Megasaur, give them all Divine Shield, you've got like Finja and 2 Murloc War Leaders all buffing each other, so 3 giant minions that now have Divine Shield and a new 5/4s on the board too. That's a scary proposition. So I'm interested to see how this card influences that particular package and see how many decks can really emphasize that and make this card viable, particularly with beast synergies and menagerie type stuff on top of that. Who knows? The sky seems to be the limit, so this feels like a very strong card with a lot of potential as long as Murlocs are at all relevant, and it seems to me like they should be. So I'm excited to see what Gentle Megasaur can do, although I have a feeling it's going to create some pretty frustrating turns where you just feel helpless and your opponent runs over your face. But that's all right. That's Hearthstone from time to time. And that said, man, that's already my review. 6 new cards. I guess I'll go through them real quickly one last time. Average card that probably won't be played a ton. Good card that'll be played. Average card that probably won't be played a ton but clearly has tech potential. Arcanologist is an average card that might be played. Tortollan Shellraiser's solid card that will be played. And Gentle Megasaur is a good card that probably will actually be played, surprisingly, for a neutral beast. You don't think of that a lot, but I have a feeling decks will support this one quite a bit. So, all that said, if you have any thoughts, comments, questions about my review, I'd love to hear your take. What cards do you think I got wrong? What did I get right? What are you most excited to play? Do you think this stuff is good, bad? Is it going to fit into the meta? Is it going to be ignored? I'd love to hear all your thoughts. So leave them in the comments below. But until then, thanks so much for watching. And until next time, game on.